Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As President and on behalf of Ladies Study Group, I am so honored to welcome you all to our very special webinar today. We are all very proud Indian citizens, and modern day India represents the largest democracy in the world with a seamless picture of unity in diversity, which is unparalleled when compared to anywhere else in the world. It is our Indian Armed Forces, consisting of the Indian Army, the Indian Air Force, the Indian Navy, which act as a shield and a sword and allow us the luxury of sleeping peacefully at night. They keep our interests safe, our enemies at bay, and the people of our country, including you and me, secure and free. We respect them and adore them for their valor and their sense of looking after all of us. The Indian military is just like a mother. It does its work selflessly and never asks for anything in return. And so today, on the eve of our Independence Day celebrations, I thought the very best way we could share our sense of pride and patriotism together would be to honor our Faujis and hear their first-hand accounts and experiences and reinforce our respect and regard for the Indian military tenfold. I would now like to play a short video to introduce our panelists today.
Vande
air officer or general officers and admiral officers, we hardly had any opportunity to interact with civilian counterparts. We had always got used to a captive audience of sailors, jawans, and air warriors, and it would speak for hours on any subject, and didn't matter whether you spoke sense or not, because we had a captive audience. But after we have retired, being a veteran, now we are getting a golden opportunity to not only address but also interact with such a fine gathering of civilian audience, especially women members of the ladies study group of ICC. Thank you once again for inviting us and all the members who are participating in this webinar. Let me first view something interesting about seniority in the armed forces, an anecdote. I think I have been selected to speak first by Anil, maybe because of the protocol that you follow in the armed forces, seniority in terms of number of service or seniority of your commission, as well as seniority in terms of rank. But there is one interesting aspect about seniority of the three services. You may not know that. Amongst the Army, Navy, and the Air Force, the three services, the senior most service is actually the Army, followed by the Navy, and then the Air Force. I think you ask a question to anyone, obviously you say that is how it should be, because the Army is the oldest and the biggest service in not only in India but in the world. And it was the armies which have always protected the country's borders, the land borders. Armies had been used by the kings and emperors to win battles and conquest, so that they became more powerful emperors and kings, and they got more glory and esteem from others. So army obviously comes first. Their visibility is the maximum. You see them all over anywhere in the world, especially in India. Navy, of course, I think is about 400, 4,000 years old, right from the Mycenaean, civilization to Indus Valley civilization, the Roman civilization, the Greek civilization, the Persian, everyone had used their, prowess in terms of naval power to win battles and make conquests. And it was only in the 15th century onward that the European powers set sail across the oceans using their might and the seas to actually capture lands and colonize the continents across the oceans like Africa, Americas, Australia, including Asia. So the Navy is next in terms of seniority. And the Air Force obviously is the youngest because it is only 115 years old. But Air Force is very effective service in terms of flamboyance, in terms of performance, in terms of its appeal and the challenges that it faces. So jocularly, I would say that an army officer would be looking for conquests and victories. Okay, and a senior naval officer will be looking for domination and, of course, colonization. And the Air Force, of course, they just like to show off, most probably. But let me tell you before I end that life in the armed forces is very, very interesting. I think it is provides not only a career but also a way of life. In this way of life, friendship matters a lot. The bonding is very great, and camaraderie and friendship actually is of such high order that you will not find such bonding in any other organization in the civil street or anywhere else. So it is unparalleled. So it's very interesting, very challenging, but very satisfying indeed. I think I'll end with that, and later on, I think I'll answer other questions as well. Thank you.
Firstly, thank you, study group, Dia and Anil, for having us here. And we are indeed consider ourselves very privileged to be, facing all of you and the audience and say a few words about the armed forces and our career in the armed forces. Well, Anil, AG Marshal Rai has already given a broad perspective about the armed forces, so I'll skip that part. But towards a more pointed question regarding the submarine arm, if one would ever ask me what was the most challenging and the most satisfying portion of my career, I would say that my first command of a submarine, there can be nothing more parallel to that tenure because that was a purely professional tenure with no political influences anywhere because I was too junior to be, even thinking of any external peripheral influences. And mind you, to command a frontline submarine at the age of, say, about 38 or so was indeed the most gratifying, most satisfying part of my career. And then life went on and one went from one appointment to the other, which is a part of destiny. And I think there are many more competent people than me who have fallen on the wayside. So that's not much of a credit. But once again, I thank all our countrymen who are seeing this for making it possible for us to serve in a service so fine and in a service where all the three components, that is the Army, Navy and the Air Force, are displaying such a tremendous sense of jointness today, which was perhaps an issue a little earlier. But I'm sure that with the current policy of the government, a formation of joint commands, theater commands, etc., this jointness, this bond between the three armed forces components is going to get even stronger.
Good evening, everyone. Once again, I noticed in this group, I'm the baby of the three panelists, so to speak, somehow I always end up in this, being the youngest. Now, latching on to what Air Chief Marshal Arup Raha said about seniority of services, what he refrained from adding was that, the army is on the ground, the Air Force at sea, or maybe under the water, a Navy, and the Air Force being the youngest service, but they stay above. So, willy nilly, they're always looking down upon us. So that's a tongue-in-cheek remark. But having said that, I think there's great bonhomie there. I'll speak a little bit about myself. I grew up in Delhi, first 17 years of my life. We lived in a hostel of armed forces, tri-service, 52 families, at the junction of the Rajpath and the Janpath, for those of you who are familiar with it. So I grew up watching about 14 Republic Day parades, which I recall, and had a great influence on me. I learned to swim from the age of 4 years in the little ponds on the India Gate lawns, which stood me in very good stead in NDA. I got my blazer in the fourth term, a blue in the third term, and so that really stood by me. And I joined the army because, frankly, I was not a very good student. I was an average student. And my dad thought it's better, push him in where he'll make his own mark. But to my surprise, when I landed up in NDA, I realized they don't want intellectuals. I mean, I got a torch every year, every term. So it was so very simple to move on ahead. And I was very fortunate to be commissioned in Skinner's Horse. Spent 20 years in my regiment. Great time. Cavalry has a ring, a romantic, a mystique about it. We could be distinguished by our very long hair. I'm appalled when I see my photographs of that time now. And we used to wear our distinctive black dungarees, which unfortunately the Punjab police commandos also wear today. Sorry to say that. But it was distinctive. And as we moved along, after 20 years, I wanted to do something different. So I moved away from the mechanized warfare scenario. And life took me on to other challenges in J&K and what have you, culminating in my landing up at Calcutta with my wife, which I think was a blessing in disguise. In all, I never wanted to retire from the armed forces without having served in the Northeast. So I think God listened to me, and that was the best time of our lives. Apart from professional gratification, it was also we fell in love with the city. I think it was 16th of June, and to give you a perspective, what's happened in Ladakh, Galwan, where we lost 20 men. Please remember, it was the third anniversary of Doklam. And the commander is still the same person, General Zhao Zongchi. He was the commander in Doklam. He is still the commander, and he was overall commander of what happened in Ladakh and what is still happening in Ladakh. Anyway, so we saw that the columns had moved up at 4:30 in the morning. We used to get a 2-hour notice quickly, and we already had troops in place. They wanted to make a road and sort of occupy a hillside or a ridge which would overlook Siliguri corridor, which was a big no-no from national security point of view. And so we weren't going to allow them. But then between them and us was the international border, which we have recognized. Our government has openly recognized it. And since independence, we've never crossed our border unilaterally. Sri Lanka was different. We were invited. So I waited for orders, and they took a while. And Delhi was discussing it. And at 4:30 in the evening, I got a go-ahead to say I can take action as I deem appropriate. There were no, restrictions on me. The government of the day reposed complete faith in the Indian Army, I'll say. I was given an absolute free hand. And in the spur of the moment, I just gave orders, move across and block them. And 450 men, fully armed for combat, walked across the international border. The Chinese were just 300 meters away and told them, stop, you will not move 1 inch ahead. For the next 73 days, the Chinese never moved an inch from there. Their initial reactions were of absolute surprise, subsequently shock, Then they try to tell us, remember 62, you can't do this. How are you doing this? They were completely taken aback. And we had day and night cameras. We kept that area under surveillance, and 450 people lined up shoulder to shoulder. The Chinese tried to match us up. They could come up only to about 250 after a couple of days, shoulder to shoulder. And the distance was, if I may say, it was nose to nose, 1 feet distance. 73 days our men stared into the face of the Chinese 1 feet away at sub zero temperatures going down to minus 13 at times, wind chill factor, high altitude area. But our day night cameras picked up and recorded everything. The Chinese would break rank at night when the officers went back. But our troops, our officers also stood in that line with the men. And that's the strength of the Indian Army. Our people never broke rank. Yes, we turned them around every 2 to 3 hours because of the chill factor, but they never broke rank for 73 days. It's a acknowledged fact. All think tanks know about it. We have a certain amount of comfort zone in addressing Pakistan. We have a affinity with them. We know everything about them. They know everything about us. So we stay in a status quo sort of a way. But of late, George Fernandez was the first to openly acknowledge China as our adversary number one. And we have been silently moving towards enhancing our capability there and the focus. And the example of it is right in your neighborhood. At Panagarh, the Mountain Strike Corps has been raised. And to give you put things in perspective, the strength of this corps, the new raising, is almost equal to the full strength of the Indian Navy. That's the kind of strength of new troops added. And I'm not even taking into account many more people who were added before that who are already in the Northeast deployed against China. So, very much. Second, another example I can give you is, we have a huge language problem. Our troops, our men, our officers, we need to understand their culture better, their dialects. And who better than Shanti Niketan University? They have stepped in, and we have a huge program of learning Chinese. I guess Park Street in Kolkata. Now our officers will be able to read the signages in Chinese very soon. That's being done.
So we are a country of diverse cultures, creeds, religions, the cliches, but like all cliches, they're generally true that India celebrates its diversity. And I grew up as an Air Force kid and saw, there was this religious place, I think it's called a dharamsthala or something like that, where regardless, especially in the army, Praveen, if I'm right, you can be a Sikh, but if you're commanding, Muslim troops, you will go to the mosque with them. You respect every religion. If you're a Christian, you will go to the Gurdwara. It doesn't matter where you come from. You are what your men are. You are what your regiment is. You are what your battalion is, or your squadron is, or the Navy is. And that unity and diversity that the Indian Armed Forces gives us, that is the moral fiber and strength of this country that keeps it together, and its huge potential that I hope gets actualized as the years go on. And we really need to thank the armed forces and these kind of men who have enforced that, strengthened that, not always easily, trust me. They are under a lot of pressure, but they have stood tall and strong. And thank you, all three of you, for representing what is the finest in this country and in our armed forces.
It is with utmost respect we salute and thank our noted speakers from the armed forces, retired Air Chief Marshal Arup Raha and Lily, retired Vice Admiral P.K. Chatterjee and Shomnishtha, retired Lieutenant General Praveen Bakshi and Nirupa. Thank you for giving your time. Thank you for sharing your real life heroic stories of courage, a great revelation for all of us, and also your personal stories of strength, reflecting the sacrifice and support that you have shared.
Thank you all so much once again for your time this evening. And with freedom in our minds, Faith in our words, pride in our hearts, and memories in our souls. Let's together salute our wonderful nation on the eve of Independence Day. Stay safe. Jai Hind.
Thank you, dear. Thank you.
Thank you very much.